Good evening. Tonight I'm going to read the second part of this paper entitled Carl Gustav Jung, Quantum Physics and the Spiritual Mind, a Mystical Vision of the 21st Century by Diogo, Valadas, Ponte, and Lothar Schäfer. I read the first half of this a week ago, and a week from tomorrow we will continue our discussion of this paper during the Monday evening live stream session. And during that we'll have a webinar. But for tonight, I just want to read the essay to you, and you can find a PDF copy of this essay, which is Creative Commons available in the Dropbox for the Carl Jung Depth Psychology Reading Group. If you're not a member of that Dropbox, please send an email to skip.conover@gmail.com. I'll put it in the chat here, and I will add you to the group. There may be one or two folks who have written me last week who I missed. So if that happened to you, please write to me. Now, why is that? Just a moment. I need to correct something here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to put the email address in again. All right, so you can send an email to that address, and I will add you to the Dropbox. So this essay is a promo, basically, of a book called Infinite Possibilities by doctors. Too many pages here. So the book is called Infinite Possibilities, and it's by Diogo, Valadas, Ponte, and Lothar Schäfer. And so this is the promotional essay about it, but it's quite provocative, and I hope you'll find it interesting. Let's see, I hope everyone can hear me. Okay, so I last week I read the first half of this essay up through part 6. And so tonight I'm going to begin with part 7, which is entitled Quantum Wave Functions Are Archetypes. It is no accident that the development of psychology as a science took a quantum leap after 1900, when the era of the classical sciences came to an end and the quantum era began. Jung's view of the human psyche presupposes a structure of the universe that is in perfect agreement with the quantum universe, but impossible in Newton's world. For example, Jung's assumption that an invisible part of the world exists which doesn't consist of material things, but of forms, the archetypes, is unacceptable in a Newtonian universe in which all phenomena depend on the properties of matter. Jung's collective unconscious is a non-personal part of the human psyche. It is a realm of forms, the archetypes, which can appear spontaneously in our consciousness and act in it, influencing our imagination, perception, and thinking. The archetypes are typical modes of apprehension, which shape, regulate, and motivate the conscious forms in our mind in the same way, in which the virtual states of atoms and molecules shape and control empirical phenomena. We must constantly reach into the realm of the archetypes and actualize their virtual forms in order to be able to live and to give meaning to life. We have described above how molecules are guided in their actions by the waveforms of their quantum states, like by inner images. Since the inner images control all the processes of the world, they must have guided to the evolution of life. In this way, biological evolution appears primarily not as an adaptation of life forms to their environment, but as the adaptation of minds to increasingly complex forms, archetypes, in the cosmic potentiality. In our minds, the cosmic forms appear as thoughts. In the physical reality, they appear as material structures. We can understand the world because the forms within our mind and the structures of the world outside both derive from the same cosmic source. It makes sense to think that all of reality is like the reality of the atoms. That is, behind the visible surface of things, there is a realm of invisible forms which have the potential to appear in the empirical world and act in it. As pointed out above, we can think of this realm like of an ocean. We can think of this realm like of an ocean whose waves are hanging together and are mind-like, so that the universe now appears as an indivisible wholeness, and consciousness is a cosmic property. The appearance of the archetypes in our mind shows our connection with a transpersonal order, beyond the narrow confines of our personal psyche. Jung pointed out the collective unconscious is, quote, a boundless expanse full of an unprecedented uncertainty, with apparently no inside and no outside, no above and no below, no here and no there, no mine and no thine, no good and no bad, where I am indivisibly this and that, where I experience the other in myself, and the other than myself experiences me. There I am utterly one with the world, so much a part of it that I forget all too easily who I really am, unquote. That was from page 21 of volume 9I, Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, volume 9 of C.G. Jung's collected works. Idealist philosophers and mystics have pursued such ideas through the ages. In the 19th century, for example, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel taught that absolute spirit is the primary structure of the universe. Everything that exists is the actualization of spirit, and everything is connected with it. Spirit is everything, creates everything, and thinking and being, subject and object, the real and the ideal, the human and the divine, all are one. Thus, Hegel concluded, our thinking is the thinking of the cosmic spirit, who is thinking in us. Thousands of years prior to Hegel, the Indian sages invented the allegory of the water pots, which are filled with water and placed in the sun. You can see the sun in each one of them, but there is only one sun. Similarly, you can find consciousness in countless human minds, but there is only one consciousness, the cosmic consciousness. Let me just quickly look at your chats. Bernard says, and hello info. Gernad says, as you make more and more powerful microscopic instruments, the universe has to get smaller and smaller in order to escape the investigation, just as when the telescopes become more and more powerful. The galaxies have to recede in order to get away from the telescopes, because what is happening in all these investigations is this: through us and through our eyes and senses. The universe is looking at itself, and when you try to turn around to see your own head, what happens? It turns away. You can't get at it. Shankara explains it beautifully in his commentary on the Kenopanishad, where he says, quote, that which is the knower, the ground of all knowledge, is never itself an object of knowledge. Okay, very interesting. I really appreciate that, Gernad. And Brian, you're quite welcome. Thank you. So I'm going to read on here. So I'm reading from this essay, which is called Carl Gustav Jung, Quantum Physics and the Spiritual Mind, a Mystical Vision of the 21st Century. And it's basically tying quantum physics together with Jungian psychology. And info says, is the passage saying that we are all one consciousness, but are also separate at the same time? I would say yes, it seems so, but I'm just reading it now, although I did read it earlier. But we're going to have a discussion of that on a week from Monday. Tomorrow we'll be at Sammy's with the local group, but a week from Monday we'll be continuing on with the discussion of this essay. So that will be December 9th, 2019. In part 7 of this essay on page 10. The word consciousness derives from the Latin con and scientia, and it means a state of knowing together. Interestingly, when we speak of our consciousness and that of other people, we always speak of our consciousness and never use the plural form, speaking of our consciousnesses. There is no plural form because there is only one consciousness, the cosmic consciousness. If our personal consciousness is merely a part of the cosmic system, it isn't amazing that archetypes can appear in our mind and act in it. By the way in which it describes the world, quantum physics has taken science into the center of ancient spiritual teachings. For example, molecular wave functions have no units of matter or energy. They are pure, non-material forms. The same is true of Jung's archetypes. Like the wave functions of quantum systems, they are pure, non-material forms. In Aristotle's metaphysics, all things are mixtures of matter and form. There was only one pure form, God. The name that quantum chemists have given the empty states of atoms and molecules, that is, calling them virtual states, is a peculiar expression, and one wonders where it is coming from. As it turns out, the concept wasn't invented by quantum chemists, but by Meister Eckhart, a medieval Dominican monk and mystic. The visible things are out of the oneness of the divine light, Meister Eckhart wrote, and their existence in the empirical world is due to the actualization of their virtual being. What a stunning phenomenon. The same unusual term appears in the mind of a medieval mystic, and then hundreds of years later in the mind of a quantum chemist. The example shows that absolute truths can appear again and again with the same messages through thousands of years in different minds, different ages, and different parts of the world. It is difficult to avoid the impression that our minds are connected to a cosmic realm of thoughts, the realm of Jung's archetypes. Jung's archetypes and the wave functions of quantum states are so similar that we could think of the archetypes as the virtual state functions of our mind, and we could speak of the virtual quantum wave functions as the archetypes of the physical reality. Because they have never been in consciousness before, the archetypes appear out of a non-empirical realm of the world. For each one of us, the birth of a conscious self is out of a realm of non-empirical forms, in the same way in which the birth of an empirical world is out of the realm of virtual states. It is difficult to avoid the conclusion that the two families of forms have their home in the same cosmic realm, that is, in the realm of the cosmic consciousness. That the world inside and outside ourselves rests on a transcendent background is as certain as our own existence. Part 8, Synchronicity and the mind-like background of the universe. Carl Gustav Jung is primarily recognized as a revolutionary psychiatrist and psychotherapist. However, the aspects of the psyche that he discovered are so profound that they go beyond the limited concerns of the human psyche, making it possible to think, for example, that the universe itself is conscious, and our own consciousness is connected with the cosmic consciousness. In Jung's theories, the concept of synchronicity plays an important role. Jung's German term, Singamash, I can't pronounce it, means a coincidence according to meaning. It is usually translated as meaningful coincidence, referring to the coincidence of two or more events, and it describes phenomena in which an event in the external world coincides meaningfully with a psychological state of the mind. That is, two or more events are connected in meaning, but not in their visible causes. As Jung describes it, in the simultaneous appearance of synchronistic events, sometimes other than the probability of chance is involved. Specifically, synchronicity consists of two factors. A, an unconscious image comes into consciousness either directly, i.e. literally, or indirectly, symbolized or suggested in the form of a dream, idea, or premonition. B, an objective situation coincides with this content. An objective situation coincides with this content. The one is as puzzling as the other. When someone dreams of an unusual event and the next day that same event actually happens in another part of the world, then we are dealing with a case of synchronicity. As Jung pointed out, such experiences are particularly stunning when an inner mental state coincides with an external event that takes place outside the observer's field of perception, at a distance and only verifiable afterward. In the framework of classical physics, coincidences according to meaning are impossible as non-random events. That is, classical physics doesn't allow causally connected physical phenomena which don't involve the exchange of physical energy or forces. Jung was aware of this problem. No one has yet succeeded, he wrote, in constructing a causal bridge between the elements making up a synchronistic coincidence. Nevertheless, he had no doubt that synchronicity was a real phenomenon, that is, based on some kind of principle or on some property of the empirical world. The quantum phenomena make it now possible to identify this property. However, as it turns out, it isn't a property of the empirical world, but it involves the non-empirical realm of reality. We have seen above that the phenomena of quantum physics force The phenomena of quantum physics force us to conclude that reality appears to us in two domains. There is the domain of the empirical, energetic, and material things, the realm of the actuality of the visible phenomena. However, in addition, behind the visible surface of things is a hidden, invisible, and non-empirical domain that doesn't consist of things, but of non-material and non-empirical forms, the realm of the potentiality of the universe. You could think that the visible world is something like the consciousness of the universe, while the hidden part is its unconscious. Info says, is the passage saying that we are all one consciousness, but are also separate? Yeah, respond to that. Rupert Sheldrake also speaks of panpsychism, a theory that there are other levels of consciousness within the universe, more specifically in nature, like trees and other naturally occurring objects. And it's been proven for many years now. The most famous early example was the example with the potatoes that the macaques, which are kind of monkey in Japan, the macaques learned to do something, which was to wash their potatoes in the sea, and they didn't physically transmit any information between islands, but suddenly all the macaques on all the islands were washing their potatoes. So that was an early example, and I think Rupert Sheldrake talks about that. We have said that the non-empirical forms in the cosmic realm of potentiality are real because they have the potential to appear in the empirical world and act in it. They can do this in two ways. They can appear as thoughts and images in our conscious mind, and as material structures and events in the external world. When one and the same form appears at the same time, both as a thought and as an experience of synchronistic event, let me read that sentence again. When one and the same form appears at the same time, both as a thought and as an external event, a mental process and an empirical occurrence express the same meaning, and we experience a synchronistic event. In a Newtonian world, such events are impossible. In a quantum world, they must occur. We can't know what causes such events because their causes, if any, are non-empirical. However, we can understand that synchronistic events are possible because the universe is an indivisible wholeness that is aware of its processes, like a cosmic spirit. Thus, we are led again to Hegel's thesis that a cosmic spirit is thinking in us. The lack of visible causal connections is an interesting aspect of synchronistic events. However, in the same way in which the quantum events seem random, but are really caused by some non-empirical processes, so the randomness of synchronistic events is only an apparent randomness. The cosmic spirit is unfathomable, but not arbitrary or mindless. Sorry, don't mind me while I turn the page. Synchronicity can involve more than a single mind and more than a few events. In the early 1900s, for example, Europe went through an era of revolutionary changes which affected all aspects of life and show all the characteristics of synchronistic events. In 1900, for example, Sigmund Freud invented psychoanalysis, and Max Planck founded quantum physics. In 1903, Henry Ford founded the Ford Motor Company, and the Wright brothers succeeded in the first motor flight. In 1905, Albert Einstein developed relativity theory, and in Paris, the first modern art show presenting paintings by André Derain and Henri Matisse. In 1907, Cubism was developed by Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso. In 1910, Arnold Schoenberg wrote the first composition of atonal music. In 1912, Vasily Kandinsky invented abstract painting. In 1913, Franz Kafka published his short stories. In 1914, James Joyce wrote The Dubliners, and the First World War began, and in 1917 was the year of the Russian Revolution. All of these developments were revolutions in their corresponding fields. We perceive a synchronistic connection between these revolutions because they had a common meaning. That is, each one of them took a given field away from the visible surface of things into a hidden, abstract, and more fundamental realm of the world. For example, when quantum physicists discovered the non-empirical realm of the world, the painters of modern art began to search for the essence of things beyond their visible surface, and psychologists discovered the hidden power of the unconscious. As Werner Hauptmann explains in his fascinating book, Painting in the 20th Century, paintings became evocative and stopped being reproductive. When physicists abandoned the notion of the eternal point, like particle in quantum physics, the visual artists abandoned in abstract paintings the infinite point of perspective, which was the cornerstone of all classical paintings. In Infinite Potential, that's the name of their book that's promoted by this essay, Infinite Potential, it's called. In Infinite Potential, the reader can find additional facts which show in a stunning way that the cultural and political revolutions that rocked Europe in the early 20th century consist of a sequence of synchronistic events. There was little physical contact or direct communication between the various pioneers of that time. The physicists, for example, didn't invent the phenomena of quantum physics by pondering the paintings of modern artists. Modern art wasn't invented by artists while they listened to atonal music. Rather, the different minds were connected in the wholeness of the mind-like background of the cosmic potentiality. The cosmic spirit was at work in a synchronistic process. By guiding the processes of our mind, the cosmic potentiality has shown its mind-like properties. The mental isn't fractured in the universe in isolated islands, but its thoughts form an ocean of thoughts that fills the entire world. Okay, quickly, one more part here. Lewis Williams says, do you believe it possible to something objective properties within the abstract painting, as in shuffling off the conscious to allow full control from the unconscious subconscious? Do you believe it possible to something objective properties within the abstract painting, as in shifting off the conscious to allow full control from the unconscious? I certainly do believe that possible. And the reason I do is because I've done a lot of painting myself, and I'm currently doing a certain amount of calligraphy. And when I do those things, I move into a state which isn't my conscious mind. And, just for an example, people would say I'm either a no good portrait painter or a too good portrait painter. And example would be the first time I went to my portrait co-op at my local adult ed center. The models were coming 5 times for 3 hours each. So all the people that were in the co-op could paint them for 15 hours. But it so happened that my first day was the last day of one individual who happened to be the executive director of the art center. And so I came in, and in 3 hours, I did what the others had worked on for 15 hours. And I just went whap, whap, whap. I just threw paint on the canvas. And fortunately for me, she bought all the portraits, every one of them. And I was quite surprised a year later to find that she had put the portrait, my portrait, in a position of honor on the wall of her office. And I asked her, I said, I thought I sort of made you look like the Grinch who stole Christmas. and so I was wondering why you put my portrait there. She said, well, yours was the one that captured exactly how I was feeling that day. And so I often do capture something that isn't in the apparent objective properties of things in my paintings. And let's see if I can very quickly, I might be able to share something with you if I can find it quickly. Let's see. Okay, I do have it. So here's a portrait. This is a self-portrait that I did. This is a portrait of me in 1970. I'm in a battle called Imperial Lake in Vietnam. And I did this painting from a photograph, but this painting contains within it everything that I have to say about the Vietnam War. And everything that I have to say about the Vietnam War is contained in the white of my left eye, believe it or not. And so you can think about that as you go back and look at this video. But anyway, so Louis, I will go back and look at, see how you paint. But anyway, I'm now to point 9, which is conclusions. And so how much more is there here? I think there's 3 more pages, so I must move along. Okay, so this is part 9 of this essay. And this is the essay entitled Carl Gustav Jung, Quantum Physics and the Spiritual Mind, a Mystical Vision of the 21st Century. And this is part 9, which is conclusions. By studying the human psyche, Jung discovered mental properties of the universe, which classical physics had suppressed. Quantum physics has now brought them back. If materialism is false, writes Imans Barus, then what is true? In Infinite Potential, this is the book of these essayists, in Infinite Potential, we have answered this question in many ways. The facts show us that there is a non-empirical realm of reality that doesn't consist of things, but of forms. These forms are real, even though they are invisible, because they have the potential to appear in the empirical world and act in it. They can do this in two ways. They can find consciousness as thoughts in our mind and actualize as material structures in the external world. Thus, the conscious and empirical world is an emanation out of a realm of mind-like forms, and quantum physics is a form of psychology. The psychology of and quantum physics is a form of psychology, the psychology of the cosmic mind. In the same way, Jung's psychology is also a branch of physics, that is, the physics of the mental order of the universe. A holistic universe is necessarily a mystical system. Scientific theories, which claim that all things and people are interconnected in a non-empirical realm of the world, are necessarily mystical theories. Jaffe has described the same conclusion in the following way. And here they're talking about Agnella Jaffe, who was Dr. Jung's secretary later in life, and who actually wrote Memories, Dreams, Reflections for Dr. Jung, or pulled it together. She says, quote, both Jungian psychology and mysticism deal with the experience of the numinous. The difference is that mysticism speaks of an encounter with God and lets the matter test at that. Jungian psychology also speaks of an encounter with God in the sense that God represents the word or the designation for something incognizable and incomprehensible. For both, God is a primordial human experience. Thus, quantum physics is a form of mysticism, and so is Jungian psychology. One hesitates to express such conclusions, but the form of mysticism that we find in contemporary science is different from its historical forms. This is so because our concepts evolve in the same way in which our bodies evolve. The evolution of our thinking is characterized by the fact that there are truths regarding the order of the world which are so fundamental that they have appeared again and again in the minds of different people, in different ages, and in different parts of the world. The Indian sages called this phenomenon Sanatana Dharma. In the 16th century, Agostino Stoico, an Italian humanist, introduced the concept into Western philosophy as perennial philosophy. We consider this phenomenon as a special form of synchronicity. It shows that our mind is a mystical mind because it is connected with the cosmic background that has mind-like properties, that is, a cosmic mind. For some reason, in our history, worldviews have always been accompanied by threats. That is, if you didn't believe in a certain story of how the world was created by God, you were threatened to go to hell. And it isn't too long ago that dissidents were really put on fire. Similarly, a scientist may find herself fired out of her job in no time when she dares to question the narrow mind frame of the contemporary sciences. Ancient concepts of the world are constantly reemerging in our thinking, but they are doing this in an evolving way. For example, Plato's claim that true reality resides in a realm of ideas outside of the visible world is very similar to the claim that the empirical world actualizes out of a realm of virtual quantum forms. Nevertheless, the quantum view isn't identical with the Platonic view. Rather, it is mathematic, quantitative, and it has led to countless practical applications that have changed our way of life. In the same way, Jung's descriptions of the human psyche may be similar to ancient views, but they are evolved versions of ancient views. We believe that the evolution of concepts and their understanding is the true function of biological evolution. It is impossible to know whether we are evolving with the cosmic mind or whether it is merely our mind that has to evolve to a better understanding of a non-evolving cosmic order. The practice of mysticism is an example of an evolving process. When we say that quantum physics and Jung's psychology are modern forms of mysticism, we don't mean that they are identical with ancient religious practices. Rather, they share essential aspects with ancient practices in an evolved way. In her appealing book, Was C.G. Jung a Mystic?, Aniela Jaffe has described fascinating aspects of Jung's mysticism, which confirm our view. Quote, if the concept mystic suggests the immediate experience of the numinous or the perceiving of an originally hidden transcendent reality, the other side, then it involves an experience which also plays a central role in Jung's approach to analytical psychology. That is, the consideration of images and contents which enter into consciousness from the hidden background of the psyche, the collective unconscious, which must be conceived of as a realm with neither space nor time that eludes any objective knowledge. What we perceive are its effects. Unquote. One more page. At this point of our analysis, we might ask, does it all matter? Why should we care? Our answer is the belief that happiness in this life can be found only by understanding the spiritual background of the universe and by living in accordance with it. Carl Gustav Jung has shown that living in accordance with the order of the universe is a prerequisite for a wholesome life. This means that we have to recognize the invisible background of reality and accept the importance of spirit in our life. As shown in Infinite Potential, the quantum phenomena corroborate analytical psychology in the sense that the invisible layer of reality is not only the source, but also the goal of our human significance. Influenced by Hindu Advaita philosopher Sankara, Foreman has expressed similar ideas. Quote, one's Atman, wholeness, cannot be produced or attained, for it is already present, is the natural condition of the human spirit. The activity that seems to bring about the experience of it does so only by destroying the bondage that had hidden it. We're only revealing what had been present all along, but hidden, Atman. The mystic's techniques are not producing something new, but revealing something pre-existent. Thought, Atman, is an ever-present reality, yet because of ignorance, it is unrealized. On the destruction of ignorance, Atman is realized. It is like the case of the ornament on one's neck. Discovering Atman wholeness is like finding a necklace hanging on one's neck. It has always been present and is indeed available, just overlooked. This image emphasizes that Atman, and with it the possibility of its realization, is always present to one. It is, in a word, innate. The state of being innate upholds a cosmic order that lets us think that we are part of it, that we are born in it, and that we are it, but we don't know it. In agreement with Jung's Weltanschauung, quantum physics confirms William James's thesis. Quantum physics confirms William James's thesis that 21st century science can no longer deny the non-empirical. Quote, "The unseen region in question is not merely ideal, for it produces effects in this world. When we commune with it, work is actually done upon our finite personality, for we are turned into new men, and consequences in the way of conduct follow in the natural world upon our regenerative change. But that which produces effects within another reality must be termed a reality itself. So I feel as if we had no philosophical excuse for calling the unseen or mystical world unreal." Unquote. I just point out that if you hadn't listened to me reading this essay right now, you might have gone on, you had the potential to go on and do something else, but instead, maybe your mind is changed a little bit by hearing this essay. And so that would be one infinite potential here and an example. The view that reality has a non-empirical background can be found at various times in the history of philosophy. We find it, for example, in the theses of the Greek Pythagorean philosopher Timaeus of Locri, 420 to 380 BCE. "God is a circle," he wrote, "whose center is everywhere and circumference nowhere." The main goal of every spiritual tradition is to unite with the transcendent reality. Different traditions may give different names to the divine, but in all of them we find the same desire to become one with the divine. Physically or psychically, that state can adopt the symbolic and transformational meaning of rebirthing, synonymous with becoming one with the self. Quote, "To the Indian, it is clear that the self as the originating ground of the psyche is not different from God, and that so far as a man is in the self, he is not only contained in God, but actually is God. Sri Ramana is quite explicit on this point. The goal of Eastern religious practice is the same as that of Western mysticism." I'll read that again. "The goal of Eastern religious practice is the same as that of Western mysticism, the shifting of the center of gravity from the ego to the self, from man to God. That means that the ego disappears in the self and man in God." Jung's teaching is an incredible achievement and a blessing for humanity. He has shown that we are connected with the non-empirical realm of the universe in which we can find our cosmic task. Denying the transcendent aspects of our nature can lead to serious problems for our physical health and spiritual well-being. Our cosmic task isn't the task of slaves who have to serve their creator. We are not the slaves of the cosmic spirit, but rather we are it, if only we try. Okay, so that is the end of this essay. I thought it was quite interesting, and I hope you did too. Hi, Mama. Good to see you. And so Info says, "Do you think quantum physics can help us understand the psychic in the same way alchemy does?" I think it probably can do better than alchemy did, because we have to remember that alchemy is quite an arcane practice that was actually given up in the 16th century, I believe, or 17th century anyway. It wasn't taught in university after the 17th century, and it was only revived by Dr. Jung. And so alchemy is a pretty mysterious thing that alchemists did for 1700 years, but most people in the world were not touched by it. And Dr. Jung has done yeoman work in helping us understand what they were doing. But in the end, we have to understand it in the context of modern categories of understanding. And so in that sense, I think for those of us who are steeped in Dr. Jung's work, we can learn quite a lot from alchemy because its images emerged before what Dr. Jung called epistemological criticism. In other words, the images that came to mind for the alchemist were pure and hadn't been divided up by different arguing scientists. And so we can see that those images are still in us today. Okay, they're very much in us. And you know, I urge you to take a look at the interview that I published yesterday, which is interview 5B of Christian Individuation, in which Nancy Pfaff really describes rebirth and what it has meant to her over this past summer. And it's really an alchemical reaction. I mean, it's the same reaction that Dr. Jung talked about when two people meet, both are transformed. And I can certainly say, well, what he said was, if anything happens, both are transformed. And I can certainly say that the now about 10 hours of interviews that I've done with Nancy are really demonstrate the transformation of both of us over that period of time. And it's truly an alchemical procedure in the psychological sense, but it helps many people understand how their life is coming together. And I think it's quite powerful. I mean, that series, especially the mini series, interviews 1 through 5, are very, very powerful. And, you know, and that was all a potentiality that was out there. You know, I just last April offered to speak to people on the telephone if they felt they needed to speak to someone, and not as a mental health professional, because I'm not that, but just as a friend saying, okay, this is what I think about this. And so Nancy called me up, and that was one of many things that she could have done on that particular day, but she called me up, and the result was that both of our lives have been changed because of it. And so I think it's worth paying attention to that interview, or that series of interviews. It's actually about 8 hours of interviews in the 5, and then there were 2 interviews back last May, and they're all relevant, and so I urge you to take a listen to those. And Sunny says, I appreciate your reading and thank you for sharing. Very thankful to have found this channel. And Grenade says, yes, interesting to say the least. Yeah, so I found this essay very, very interesting and useful. And as you probably know, last Monday, we already discussed line by line the first 4 pages of this essay. There's 14 pages that have guts in it. And so we have about 10 more pages to go. And I intend to go through it line by line. starting a week from tomorrow on December 9th until we finish. And tomorrow we'll be having our local meeting, which will be broadcast in the same fashion as we have done before from Sammy's Italian Pizza Kitchen. This is our custom. This is the group that got our discussions going in the first place. And we actually had 70 weekly meetings before my left knee gave out and I had to have my knee replaced. And then I had to go online in order to maintain the weekly sessions. And so since then, we've been having our meetings online every Monday evening at 8 U.S. Eastern Time. And we also have our advanced reading group meetings every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And so we hope you can join. And hello, Nick. It's nice to see you here. I appreciate your support very much. And so anyway, the purpose tonight was to get the rest of this essay plugged into the YouTube channel. I'd also urge you to take a look at the political psychology channel. This is a separate channel that I've started to manage. And let's see if I can give you the link. It's not there. Okay, sorry. I don't seem to be able to do it right this second. But anyway, there is a political psychology channel, and I want to make you aware of it. I've put the link in various places, and if you look at the first 10 or so readings of the Red Book, for example, I put the link for the political psychology channel at the beginning of the descriptions for those readings. And so I'd appreciate it if you can go over there and subscribe and start listening there. I'm going to start making, as often as possible, commentary on American politics, which is always a fun topic. And if you want to join over there, I'd be happy to have you. I'm going to try to do those presentations during the day. Mondays, though, are usually quite busy for me, so I may not get one done tomorrow, but I'd love to see you there as well as here. So E. Asmi says, would you say the existence of mystery is a condition of your own existence? I would say definitely, because, you know, what makes you think you exist? I don't know what makes me think I exist. What I know is the more I travel around the world, the more I find I'm right where I have always been. So I've traveled to many countries of the world. I've lived in many countries of the world. And when I find myself in another country, I find that I'm still me. And, you know, I could be running this live stream for many of those countries as well, and not much changed. So, so it's a mystery how everything works in life. And by the way, if you want to hear some real discussion of synchronicity and so on, go and listen to my talk entitled Finding the Living God. And that's about finding God within you. Okay, in other words, where's God? Well, you know, the God that you can be conscious of is the God that's directing your life. And that has nothing to do with any specific creed or anything. It's as much Atman as it is self, or God the Father in Christianity, or whatever, Allah. All of these gods are one and the same in the end. And so, you know, if you go listen to my talk entitled Finding the Living God, you'll see what I mean. And so anyway, I'll see you tomorrow for the regular Monday night session. And Thomas says, that's funny. I don't know, what was it I said that was funny? See, I was asked a little earlier whether I thought that mysticism gets into painting and so on. And I think all creativity gets us into that place. And I find it happens to me when I'm doing a live stream like this. I have no idea what I've said in the last hour. And I always have to go back and listen myself to know what I've said, because it comes from myself. It doesn't come from my ego. Granat says, God does exist and God doesn't exist simultaneously. Quantum physicists are still stumped. And Granad, you're quite right. And that's where we get the energy, because of that distinction. And oh, by the way, it's a formula that will never be solved. Okay, there's no solution. If you want to find the solution to something that's impenetrable, but what you think about it, if you want to know really what you think about it, like, is this person the person for me? What you do is you flip a coin. And if on the first flip, if you get what you want, you say, great, I got what I want, and you move on. But if you say best 2 out of 3, then you know yourself, your psyche wants the other side. Okay, so it's as simple as that, and you can feel it instantly. If you flip a coin, ask any question to the coin, and it's a question that you really want to know the answer to, but you flip that coin, and if you're happy with the answer, then that's the answer. If you want to go best 2 out of 3, then you know you wanted the other side. Your psyche, yourself, wanted the other side. And if you keep frantically going, saying, oh, I'm going to flip again, actually, you don't have to do that, because you already know, if you want to flip it again, that you really wanted the other side. Yourself wanted the other side. That's the answer. And I can tell you that that's always true. Yeah, quantum physicists are still stumped, except for these. These seem to be quantum physicists. So that's their book that they were promoting through this essay, and we're promoting tonight. It's called Infinite Possibilities, and I'd urge you to take a look at it. Mama says, oh, regarding we're part of mystery, and you said, what makes us think we're even here, or something like that. Well, dang, I missed most of the show. Be safe and all, and thanks. Well, you can go back and listen to the playback. It should be available within the next 30 minutes or so. It always takes YouTube some time to render it, but it'll be up very soon. So thank you for joining me this evening. Tomorrow we'll be broadcasting live from Sammy's Italian Pizza Kitchen. So there will be no webinar per se tomorrow. It'll be just a direct broadcast from my iPhone. So see you then. Peace.